So, Baruch Hashem, we're going to start the Lulav ve-Aravah today, which was said on the second night of Sukkot. Remember, the kvius of Ranat was that Sukkot was on Shabbos. First day Sukkot on Shabbos was like first day Rosh Hashanah. And so the Maimah starts with also discussion about the mitzvah of Lulav on Shabbos, or rather the non-performance of the mitzvah of Lulav on Shabbos, and compares it to the situation with shofar, and that's going to be our introduction. And the Maimah doesn't answer the questions, just like it doesn't answer the questions with shofar. So it's just a haskalah, but there's no siyum. There was no siyum added to this to answer its questions. You have to look in other places to find the answers to those questions. Let's do this haskalah first before we start talking about the Maimah itself and its place within the hemshekh, because let's talk about that when we get to the actual body of the Maimah on the beginning of Amud Mem. Okay? Yeah. So we'll talk about that in a second. Good. Lulav ve-Aravah shish v'shiva. Chuli. Lulav ketzad. Yontiv harishon shel chag shechal liyos b'Shabbos. Lulav shiva v'shar kol hayamim shisha. So we have the Mishnah in Sukkah, which explains how sometimes the mitzvah of Lulav will be for 6 days out of the 7 days of Sukkot, and sometimes it will be 7 days out of the 7 days of Sukkot. How's that so? When the first day of the Yontiv, when it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, falls out on Shabbos, then you would shake the Lulav and Esrog on Shabbos. But if it was one of the other days, if first day of Sukkot was any other day than Shabbos, so then the Shabbos Chol HaMoed Sukkot would be one of the other 6 days of the Yontiv. Then you wouldn't shake the Lulav on Sukkot. So you'd only have 6 days of the mitzvah rather than 7. Okay, so the Rebbe explains more precisely. This is not just in the Beis Hamikdash, where we said at the beginning of the first Maimah that shofar is doicha Shabbos in the Mikdash, because there's no Shvus in the Mikdash, but not in the Gvulin, not in the rest of the territory. But when it comes to Lulav, when the Lulav falls out on Shabbos, the first day of Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, then the mitzvah of Lulav is not just doicha Shabbos in the Mikdash, but also in the Gvulin. But if it would be any other of the 7 days that fell out on Shabbos, then it's not Deicha Shabbos B'Gvulin. Okay, so it's different to Shofar, yeah?
Yeah.
This is all when the Beis Hamikdash existed. But after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and the first day of Sukkot would fall out on Shabbos, you would not shake the Lulav in any of the other places like you would have done were the Beis Hamikdash still to exist. Why? Okay, for the same reasons, sort of ultimately fall back on the same reason that we do with shofar. So the first question is, why is the mitzvah of Lulav different from shofar? That shofar ain't a deicha as a Shabbos b'Gvulin, even in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, you do not blow the shofar in the rest of the country. Like we quoted at the beginning. Right? That was the beginning of our Maimah in the first Maimah. So there we see clearly the Tkir shofar is in the Beis Hamikdash when it's then, but not in the Medina. But Lama Lulav deichas Shabbos. So why is Lulav able to override Shabbos even in the rest of the country? Then he deepens the question. Ubifrat shar yadu. The question is not just two equal things. Why is one more than the other? There's a hierarchy of value in the relationship of Shefa and Lulav. The whole premise of the mitzvah of Lulav is a hemshekh, is a continuation, is an outcome, is something that comes about because of the tkir of Shefa. How do we see that? There's a medrash rabba there's a medrash rabba Pashas Em on the pasuk lekachtem lechem. It says Mashul l'shnayim shenichlu zifnei hadayim v'leisam yadim anatzach. It's like two people who go before a judge, and we're unsure which one of them was victorious. Man denosit bayim b'yodei on yadin duhu natzach. The one who comes out holding aloft his spear, bayim, like his bayonet, maybe. I don't know if there's any etymological connection there, but he's holding up his sword. We know that he's not. That's a sign of victory. You're going around holding aloft your weapon. Kach Yisrael va'akum boim mekatrim lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Rosh Hashanah. So too the Yidden and the Avodah Zarah come before Hashem, and on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Adin. Kevin Shisrael Yotzim Lulavim Vesrigim b'Yodeim on Yadin on the Didan not Tzachuli. So by the Yidden coming out holding the Lulav and Esrogim aloft, it's a simon that they were not saying. So the whole mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog is seen as an outcome, and you're able to shake the Lulav and Esrog because you were menatzeach in the din through what? Through the mitzvah of Shefa. Because the whole idea of Shefa is to cause that Hashem should be omed mikisei din, but yeshiv mikisei rachim. Ola likim bisruah, ha'avaya bekel Shefa. Elikim midat din, ha'avaya midat rachamim. As we're gonna spell out in a second. V'zeh yadu. The Mashi so manatzkim hainu ha'idetike Shefa. This hatzlacha, this nitzachin bedin is achieved through the tkir of Shefa. It is medrash rabba pasuk v'chedesh hashvi. So again in the medrash rabba it says on the pasuk v'chedesh hashvi. At the outset, Hashem is sitting on Kisei Din. But since the Yidden blow their shafers, he gets up from the Kisei Din and gets down to the Rachim. Shenem Avaya Bekel Shefa Mismale Aleim Rachim Chalik. It says Avaya Bekel Shefa. Ola Likim Bisruah. Through the Truah, Hashem is Ola Likim. Havaya bekel Shefa, and the Havaya and the Midas Arachimim is from the Kel Shefa. So the true and the Kel Shefa causes this transition from Elikim to Havaya, from Midas Hadin to Midas Arachimim. V'nimtza. So what do we find? Zeh sheYisrael manatzchim yismis mali rachimim al Yisrael hu al yidei tkir Shefa. Way that the Yidden are menatzeach, how the Jews successful and victorious, and how is it that there's an abundance of rachamim for Yisrael? This is through this tkir of Shefa. This is what's implied or explicitly stated by the Medrash. Yeah? So if you combine the two midrashim, you get the sense how the holding aloft the Lulav and Esrogim, or the key of the mitzvah of Lulav and Esrog, is a result of the tkir of Shefa. So now it's not understood to a greater extent. If the Shefa is the initial, is the fundamental cause, is incapable of, or is not allowed to be override Shabbos in the rest of the country. But Lulav deiches HaShabbos, and Lulav is yet able to be deiches HaShabbos. Fine, so that's question one. But more, and then, so that's question one with a nimuk. So it's sort of the question is not just a general question. Why are two equal things different? We're saying two unequal things, and we've got a cause and an effect, and it seems like the effect is much more effective than the cause. That's number one. But then it all changes. It's all only specifically when there's a Beis Hamikdash. But Achshav Gam Lulav Deichas Shabbos. So there's another detail that this question applies only to Zman Mikdash Kaim. Why is this specific when there's a Beis Hamikdash and not when there's a Beis Hamikdash? So we need to understand the reason for this. Taki, you're going to have to look somewhere else to find the answer. I don't know. So now we can do a quick summary of the previous Maimah, of the point he made in the previous Maimah. Okay, so we explained above that the Medrash tells us that initially Hashem wished to create the world mitzadin. He saw the world was incapable of managing in such circumstances, so therefore shittiv mitzarachim. In this spoiler, we explained above in the previous Maimah. What was this intention to create the world mitzadin? What does that mean to create the world mitzadin? What was the kavanah? We said it was three things. We said it would have three benefits. One, the people would be obedient. There would be fear of punishment, which, although is not the most perfect Aveda, but per mamish, it would achieve what needs to be achieved. People would not do Avedas, so they'd be scared. And then the more significant sort of impact, which we said, it would bring about a shleimus Aveda. That the person himself would have a much more pukner shleimusa. We described in the Zayah that when there's a small deicha, when you have the smell of the giluv, the smell of elim, the giluv midas ardin, then people will be aroused to an avodah of small deicha. They'll be self-critical, they'll be judgmental of themselves, and there'll be bitush, there'll be achna, there'll be shiflus, there'll be kevid reish. And the small deicha is smela tach the reish. It will allow the person to reach the reish hanashama, the etzem hanashama, and have the b'chol meidachel, which is a shleimus of avodah. And more than that, and then afterwards you'd have a greater gilui, an amshach of elikus. The three things we said at the beginning of the Maimah Shuv Yisrael. And that's what he said in the Zohar. This perfect avodah, who performs it? It's the Levim. And through this, people are capable of knowing about the emunah ilah, the high emunah, the supernal emunah, inyan hu da atika, which we explained was atika. But avad alevi hu, through the avodah of the Levi, you have the gilul hu, the bechinas atik. Okay, quick summary of the previous Maimah of what was the kavanah of creating the world mitzadin. Now, the Rebbe Rashab is going to give a different pshat. So we said this is the second section in the hemshekh. First two Maimarim is the first section. The next three Maimarim, Shuva Yisrael, Lulav ve-Aravah, which we're in now, is the second section. And then the last three Maimarim are the third section. And the second section of the hemshekh is split into two. You have Shuva Yisrael, which is the sort of B1, section B1, first part. And now we're going to section B2. The second section of the hemshekh, and within that section, the second part. That makes sense. And it's going to extend over two Maimarim. The Maimarim of Lulav ve-Aravah and B'yei Mashmi Atzeres. They're both quite long Maimarim. And Bechlal, from now on, the hemshekh is going to be quite dense, quite terse, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot harder. It's not going to be as Shuv Yisrael was a relatively easy Maimah to read. The Aveda is very, very difficult, but the act of reading the Maimah was quite smooth, right? From now, basically till the end of the hemshekh, is going to be a lot harder. It's not. I don't want to scare you. It's not Really, it's not like the second. It's not like you're not going to get anything like Yechiinu Miyamayim, that type of difficulty in reading, but it's going to be a bit more difficult, and you're going to have to concentrate to really follow the flow of things. So I just want to give you a short summary of what this second pshat is going to be. He wants to give an alternative, and what he describes as a complete opposite pshat to what is given in Shuva Yisrael. But why did Hashem want to create the world with Midas Hadin? The pshat Midas Hadin in Shuva Yisrael was that Hashem would be very exacting, intense, on your head the whole time. You'll be so scared to have Eivishter. The Eivishter is always there. It's such a gilu elikus. The gilu elikus would be so intense that you'd be so self-aware of your own inadequacy in the face of the greatness of elikus, and it would be ma'ira you to bit, to shachna, shiflus, and then the gilu etzem and neshama, it will be overwhelming. The second pshat is that Midas Hadin means that Hashem will be exacting with Himself. Hashem is going to be exacting with Himself. The concept of Midas Hadin becomes Midas Hatzimtzum. Hashem is going to be very sparing with Himself. He's going to perform the act of tzimtzum on Himself. So as you can imagine, we're going to be talking a lot about tzimtzum. So Hashem is going to be concealed and hidden. The Midas Hadin is not so much about like in the Shuva Yisrael, where the person themselves is going to be judgmental with them. So they're going to judge themselves. That was more or less the pshat of Midas Hadin. The outcome of there being the smell elyon, be the smell deicha, is the person is going to be judgmental with himself. In these Maimorim, the word is that Hashem is going to be judgmental with Himself. It's going to withhold Himself. It's going to constrain Himself. It's going to constrict Himself. It's going to hide Himself. And the outcome of that is there's going to be a tremendous sense of hafrada, of separateness from Hashem. We're not going to be aware that Hashem exists. Hashem is going to be so concealed as if there's no Eibishter. And if the world had only been created Midas Hadin, we wouldn't be aware there's an Eibishter, which would have been a huge nisayon, a tremendous challenge. Because why? If you're in a circumstance where it's difficult to appreciate Elikus, but not impossible, then you have a choice. Okay, you can make a cheshbon. There's taivas elam hazeh, which you can see, which you can appreciate, which you can enjoy, and then there's taiva elikus, which is very hard. The famous vart about if the Eibshter would have put all of the taivas of the world in a book, and all the things in the Torah He would have put in the world, it wouldn't have been such an isayah, right? Wouldn't be so difficult. Avodas Hashem. But Avodas Hashem is this challenge of overcoming the instant gratification that a person can get from Ilm Hazeh for the eternal pleasures that can come from Torah mitzvahs and Elikus. That's all Seder Avodah. The word and Nisayon is that it's such a helen v'hester. And Nisayon is a real helen v'hester. You don't even have two sides of the coin. You only have one side of the coin. And you have to dig somewhere very deep inside of you. You can't use this logic, you can't use this process of logically assuming that it's better to have something which is meaningful but less accessible than something that's accessible that's not so meaningful. That's already a cheshbon. That's already say tam b'das. In order to overcome a nisayon where all you can see is the gashmi, all you can see is the helen, and you still choose elikus, that you have to dig into, that you have to reach the etzem neshama. That the Eibishter uses nisyonis to arouse in us. And nisyon is something that's a real, it's a real impossibility. It's an nisyon. To call something a test means that there's no other way around it. It's not possible to square the circle that says Yitzchak is going to be your offspring and your legacy, and go and kill Yitzchak. Right? Doesn't it's not they're not two compatible statements. So it's an nisyon. These are things we call nisyonos. So if Hashem would have created the world in Midas Hadin, everything would have been a nisyon. Why? Because we'd have no clue about Elikus. Elikus would be so behel and behester because everything would be Midas Hadin. The Eibishter would have mitzamtzim himself to such an extent where you say, well, why would the Eibishter want to mitzamtzim himself so much? Because then you'd have the Avodah of Nisyonos. And Avodah of Nisyonos, it gets to the Etzem and Neshama. So not like in Shuv Yisrael, where how do you get to the Etzem and Neshama through there being an intense Gilui of Elikus, of the Smol HaElyon, which sort of bullies you into a state of Smol Deicha, which then reaches to the Rosh Hashanah, which then is an Abed B'chol Ma'idecha, and then that causes there should be a hemshekh of Atzmos Ein Seif. That was Shuv Yisrael. But in Lulav ve-Aravah and Rini Mashmi Atzer, it's going to be different. It's going to be telling us that the Eibishter Midas Hadin is that he hides himself to such an extent that we're completely unaware of his presence. And then what was the why would Hashem want to do that if his Teva Tov Lehitiv? Why would he want to completely hide himself? Because then we'd have the Avodah of Nisyonos. What do you think the flaw in that plan would be?
Would it pass this?
Yeah, it gets to a point where you'd lose all the benefits because people won't be able to withstand the nisyonos. So but so the purpose of these two Maimarim is going to explain to us how that reality works. What does the world look like when the Eibishter creates the world Midas Hadin? Which the Eibishter does create the world Midas Hadin. It's not the Pshat, he doesn't create the world Midas Hadin. It's Shitvim Midas Rachamim. You have to understand how the Shitvim Midas Rachamim solves the problem. We don't meaning by learning all these things, we're not learning something which was just like sort of a fantasy. The Olav Machshava is what you originally saw, and then he did something else. He didn't do something else. The same thing which was Olav Machshava, he
modified.
He modified. You've got to understand what's being modified. So we're not just learning this in order to. It's not like sometimes you have a svar in the Gemara, which is going to be deicha. You're not deicha the svar and completely, and then it doesn't work. It's not got any use anymore. This is going to be the fundamental foundation and the basis of how we're going to perceive of how the world was created, and what is the benefit and the outcome from it. So in order to do that, we're going to have a considerable arichas explaining the difference between Atzilus and Biyah, and we're going to learn about Das Elyon and Das Tachtim. We're going to get into sort of the Gedichte Sugyas in Chassidus. Okay, so put your seatbelt on. Let's go. Ahmed Mem at the top. There's an alternative. There's an alternative pirush in the words of the Medrash of what it means. The Olav Machshava Liveris Elam Mitzadin, Mashvit Chilal Machshava Liveris Elam Mitzadin, V'achaka Shit Mitzad Arachamim, but Oifan Achem Imashnis Boilil. In another way than what we explained above. First of all, also Kedai, it's helpful. I mean, you have this all the time in the Gemara, but it's always worth emphasizing the existence of alternative pirushim, meaning that the purpose of a hemshekh is not to give you a dogmatic theology, an idea about the creation of the world and the purpose of existence. He's not just trying to give you a one-dimensional idea. The very existence of two alternative approaches to the very same question, not just alternative, but completely opposite pirushim, should hopefully allow your mind, the ish haloimid, the person learning the hemshekh, shouldn't be a rigid, dogmatic thinker. You have to be an agile thinker to learn Chassidus. It's not trying to box you into a corner and make you think only one way. To passionately argue or explain an idea and spend a whole mind. It takes time to write a mind, to think a mind, to prepare a mind, and everything, and to then give you an alternative, not just to stick with this. And as when we get to the third section, all of the shit of Midas Arachim is constantly being played against, together, being computed with the two Pirushim. It's not trying to turn you into a rigid thinker, it's trying to turn you into an agile thinker. Okay? It's important to me. I mean, you see this on a page of Gemara, you've got the Rashi and Tosfos on the very same page, you've got the Machlekes. You're not allowed to get into rigid thinking. Rigid thinking is not a good place to be.
Rigid in the sense that you don't want to have other ways of understanding something.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you know there's so many different ways of approaching the same theme, it allows you to be yourself more questioning of when something comes to you. You're thinking that 1 second, this is not the only way to think about this. There are other ways of thinking about this. What would happen if you would think about it this way? How would that change it and adapt? Okay. So we're gonna base our pirush, this new pirush, on the pasuk in Yeshaya. And this is a pasuk in Yeshaya that's mentioned a lot in Chassidus and used as a staple pasuk to refer to the Eilumis of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Nasiya, because you have the Asius of Barasiv, Yitzasiv, Achasisiv, Bri, Yitzir, Nasiya. Sometimes there's the emphasis on the Af, the separation of Asiya from Yitzasiv. But let's first get an idea. What is this pasuk saying? Al Pi Pshat in Yeshaya. So Yeshaya is talking about Nevuah, about Lulav, and he says there, Kol HaNikra Bishmi, all those who are called by my name, V'lichvaydi Barasiv, and with my covered I created them. So two descriptions. Someone who's Nikra, those who are Nikra Bishmi, and those that Lichvaydi Barasiv. Now the Pashto Pshat is referring to the same thing, it's referring to Tzadikim. So Rashi says, you should know, Yitzarsiv, Afasisiv. I've prepared, I've sort of made them, I've formed them, and I've made them with all the things that they need for the future. For the Lulav. I've prepared everything for their needs. I've formed them, I've made them in such a manner. This is what Rashi says. So Kol HaNikra B'Shmi V'lichvaydi Barasiv Yitzarsiv Afasisiv. That's the Pashto Pshat. Before we get into the Chassidus. So here comes the Chassidish Pshat. The Choshev Kan Gimel Eilumis Bri Yitzir Asiya. Yeah, Barasiv Chuli. The Kol HaNikra B'Shmi, and the Kol HaNikra B'Shmi is a reference to Eilam HaAtzilus. All those who are called by my name. Who are those that are called by my name? That is the Eilam of Atzilus. Atzilus is the Kol HaNikra B'Shmi. U'ma shenikra Eilam Atzilus Shmi. So why is Taka Eilam Atzilus called my name? Yishloimar Tini Yodua the Shmi Hu Shem Havaya. When it says Shmi, what name is it referring to? It's referring to the Shem of Havaya. Kamesha Kosu B'Ani Havaya Hu Shmi. You have another pasuk in Yeshaya. The Ani Havaya Hu Shmi. Abish refers to Havaya as Shmi. So Kol HaNikra B'Shmi. all those who are called by my name, all those who are referred to as Shem Havaya. Who's referred to as Shem Havaya? That's the Olam of Atzilus. Shem Havaya is an Olam Atzilus. If you have the general distinction of Havaya and Elikim, yeah, then Havaya is an Atzilus and Elikim is an Olam Biyah. Elikim is a Shem of Midas Adin, Midas Atzimtzum, where Shem Havaya is Shem Hagilui. So in Atzilus there's a Gilui of Elikus, and in Olam Biyah there's a Tzimtzum and a Helam of Elikus. Yeah? So the Yost about Atzilus Mei Shem Havaya, and since in Atzilus there's a Gilui of Shem Havaya, Ki Yudua de B'derech Klal Havaya Hu B'Atzilus, we ordinarily refer to Havaya as being in Atzilus. We talk about Yud B'Chachma Hei B'Bin Chuli, yeah? We say Vav is Zoh and Hei Achrein is Malchus. So in Geras HaTshuva, when we talk about Yud Kei Vav Kei and Teshuva is Toshav Hei Tata, yeah? Which is Yerid to Biyah. Zoh HaHefresh Ben Atzilus the Bri Yitzirasiyah. And this is the broad difference between Atzilus to the Eilamus of Bri Yitzirasiyah. The Ba'atzilus Meir Shem Havaya, Ba'eilamus Biyah Meir Shem Elikim V'Shem Adnai. Okay, so this is we're just mapping things onto the pasuk, but at the same time we're trying to distinguish and we're going to the main focus of the Maimah here is going to be understanding the difference between Olam Atzilus and the Olam Biyah. That you could broadly use the Shem of Havaya to encompass all of the Olamis. Atzilus together with Biyah. That Yud is not Atzilus. Hey Bebriya Vav Yitzir and Hey Achrin Vasiyah. Okay? So that's one. That's one way around it. That's sort of in the Sifri Kabbalah it sometimes says that. When you talk about Olamis Biyah reflecting the Oisius of Hey Vav Kei, so Atzilus Yud, Bria Hey, Yitzira Vav, and Asiya Hey. So the Hey Vav Hey, which is in Biyah, when we talk about that, we're not talking. We're talking about it as it is a makabel, as it is a beneficiary from Atzilus. The way Atzilus is mislabish in those elements, because Havaya is in Atzilus. Yukevavke is in Atzilus. So when Atzilus is mislabish in Biyah, there's an element. There's those elements, and it's describing the elements of Atzilus the way they are mislabish in Biyah.
Also, when we look at it from the other side, very often we try and say how Abiyah is found in all different levels. So we have like the Olam Necholos, and also in Atzilus itself, we often say that Chochm would be Atzilus, Brian, Ben and Chesed would be like Brian stuff.
Right. Yeah. So in this context, true. The Eim Me'ilah Mekanan of the Bria. Eim Me'ilah is a reference to Bina in of Atzilus. The Bina of Atzilus is Mekanan of the Bria. It nestles in Bria. In Bria is Hey Rishayim. Because I'll be Yitzirachuli. So there'd be the Gilui of the Hey Law of Eimei Law Bina in Eilam Bria. So therefore we make this reference of the Hey of Shem Havaya being in Bria and Azivaita. But it's not Shem Havaya as it is. It's Shem Havaya how it comes through the Tzimtzum and through the formatting, so to speak, of Shem Elikim, because we still have this broad distinction that Atzilus is Shem Havaya and Olamis Biyah is Shem Elikim and Adnai. By Masha Kosuf, Bekisei Melech, Al Maim HaTikun Yizayah, Eimei Lo, Mekana B'Gzai, V'Tikun Vav, Daled, Tikun Vav, Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. Habal Etzim Shem Havaya Hu B'Atzilus. Okay, so that is our first distinction. To understand the difference between Atzilus and Biyah is in Atzilus you have a Gilui of Shem Havaya, and in Olamis Biyah is Shem Elikim and Shem Adonai. So we're gonna, as we go on, we're gonna describe what is the impact of that. What difference does that make? And this distinction, where does it all originate from? The Shem Havayu b'chinat gilui hakav ki yudua. B'ha'aretz hakav mistayim b'atzilus. So, what is Shem Havaya? Shem Havaya is the gilui of the Eir HaKav. And we know from the Sifrei Kabbalah that ha'aretz hakav mistayim b'atzilus. So, we're going to have to have a better understanding of the Eir HaKav. What does it mean? Shem Havaya is the gilui of Eir HaKav. What is the Eir HaKav? Eir HaKav is the gilui of Eir Seif. Is Eir Seif? Eir Seif HaMamalek Kol Almin. Yeah, the Eir, which is the Eir Gvuli, because it's Kav. But Ein Seif is Pashtus. There's the Eir HaKav, and Shem Havaya. What is the name of anything? The name of anything is the manifestation of that thing. Is the displaying, the name of something is the way that thing displays itself to something else. So when we say Shem Havaya, we're talking about how the Eir HaKav, the Eir Ein Seif, HaMamalek Kol Almin, displays itself, presents itself. So that is what Shem Havaya is. Now, since the Eir HaKav is Mistayim Ba'atzilus, since it's Eir HaKav, here we're talking about, not the Eir HaKav, not the impact of the Eir HaKav. Of course, the impact of the Eir HaKav goes all the way through the Eilumis. But the Eir HaKav itself, the Etzem Eir HaKav, doesn't go beyond Eilam Atzilus. Because we can explain how in Eilam Atzilus, Eilam Achdus, Iva Chayu Echad, Iva Gomel Echad. Because Eir, what is Eir? Eir is with Dovik in Ma'ir. Right? Which is only in until Eilam Atzilus. Once you go through the parsa between Eilam Atzilus and Biyah, there's already Afrad, you already have a Metzias Yesh. Something a separateness from him. And Eir can't be separate. So the Etzema Eir can't be separate. So the Eir HaKav is Mistayim in Atzilus. Because it's only there that it's possible for it to still remain as an Eir HaKav. Otherwise it wouldn't be Eir HaKav. Yeah? And so that's why Shem Havaya, which is the Gilui of Eir HaKav, is in Atzilus. Now even though there is also a barrier, a veil, between Kesser and the Chochmah of Atzilus, which facilitates a tzimtzum in the Eir, so it's possible for there to be the spheres of Atzilus. So you'd say, well, just like Eir HaKav can't go beyond the parsa between Malchus of Atzilus and Kesser of Bria, which is our argument. You should say the same thing. It's not possible for Eir HaKav to go beyond the parsa between the Kesser of Atzilus and the Chochmah of Atzilus. So he distinguishes and differentiates between the two parsais. The parsa zu ain't a parsa mafsekes umalemes. The parsa between Kesser of Atzilus and Chochmah of Atzilus is not a parsa which is mafsekes umalemes. It's a different type of parsa. So you can have a parsa. What is ordinarily what's the notion of a parsa? You have a parsa which is it can be a tzimtzum, so you just reduce the Eir. Or you can have a parsa which alters the Eir. Right? In order to reduce something, you don't need to be such intensity. Just on a physical level, the curtain you can have a block out curtain, or you can have a curtain which is translucent, which allows through some that would be tzimtzum, which is b'derech miut, not tzimtzum b'derech siluk. Yeah, and then you can have the issues of coloring, of changing the color of the thickness of the and the substance of the You can take out, when you talk about in the atmosphere, that the air that comes from the sun has to be altered fundamentally in order to remove the damaging rays. Right? So you have these types of parsa'is which can be mafsekes and ma'alemes. The parsa between Keser of Atzilus and Chachma of Atzilus is more of a sort of in the sense of it being an organizing parsa. It's taking an Eir and organizing it, but not altering it. So you can say organizing is also a tzimtzum of sorts. And I don't think it's denying that, otherwise it won't be called a parsa. But it's not. When it says Eina parsa mafsekes uma'alemes, it must be to a certain extent ma'alemes and magbeles, but of a completely different order. So tzimtzum b'derech miut, not tzimtzum b'derech siluk. In Cain, you can look it up if you want to look in 455. You'll find more arichas about the differences between the parsais. Im Cain, Shem Havaya mei begilu ba'atzilus, v'lochein nikra atzilus shemi shul bechinas Shem Havaya. Okay, so we've explained that in Atzilus there's a gilu of Shem Havaya, and the reason why in Atzilus there's a gilu of Shem Havaya because Shem Havaya is the gilu of the Eirakav, and the Eirakav is only up until the Eilam of Atzilus. You with me?
Yeah.
But Oijesh Laimar, and furthermore we can say the Mashnik Shmi, the reason why Shem Havaya is called Shemi is Kamei Hashem, or rather, why Atzilus is called Shemi is Kamei Hashem Hu Bechinas Ha'ara Levad. What is a name? A name is the sort of the gilui of something. It's the gilui of that thing. It's the way that thing manifests itself to something else. But loy etzem, it's not the thing itself. The name of a thing is not the thing itself. It is an articulation of the thing. A shame is always of the thing, but it's not the thing itself. Like a person's themselves, their own name, is not their entirety. But whilst it's only a ha'ara, it's a ha'ara that is, it's like an oir, it's a gilui, which is dovuk in its ma'ir. So the whole thing, when a person faints, you call their name and it's able to be ma'ir the nefesh. The name is miyuchad, is dovuk, just like an oir, the gather of oir, right? Oir is dovuk in its ma'ir. It's still only an oir, it's only a ha'ara bilvad, but it's dovuk, it's miyuchad. So that is a good way of describing Eilam Atzilus. Because on the one hand, it's only a gilui. Shem Havai is just a gilui of Eirakav. Yeah? It's like I separated, I have it saltim naruach. I dispersed. It's just like a name is. It's a gilui of something. But at the same time, it has the quality of being dovuk. It's attached to its origin. What the thing which it is only a ha'ara of, it is miyuchad with that name. That's how you have another meaning of the word atzilus, that it is this idea of being near to something. Shedovakum yuchad, because it's near to its source. Shedovakum yuchad v'mekeirei, zeu shmi ham-yuchad bi, and that's why when we say the Lashon Shem Havaya, you call it, why is it shmi? It's the shmi ham-yuchad bi, it's my unique name. This is on the one hand, but shmi ha-meyuchad bi is the name which is meyuchad, is one, is united with me, it's attached to me. Okay, so that is the Atzilus, right? Yeah. Why in the pasuk in Yeshaya it says Kol Hanikra B'Shmi, all those are called by my name, is a reference to Elam Atzilus, because Shem Havai is an Atzilus. Because it is a Gilul Erakav, which concludes in Atzilus. And second of all, the idea that Atzilus has the quality of being like a name. On the one hand, it's Ha'ara Bilvad, but on the other hand, it's Miyuchad with the Eir and Seif, of which it is a Ha'ara. Okay, so there's a range of material there for us to understand the significance and the relevance of Atzilus being referred to as Shemi. Let's do the next bit. And when we talk Bechlolas Ha'ilams, like we know, like you mentioned before, you have Abiyah the Pratus and Abiyah the Klolus. When we refer to Seder Shtalshnus, there's a specific darga called Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asir. And that's what we call Abiyah the Protus. When we talk about Abiyah the Klolus, we sort of move up a level. We refer to Eirin Seif Shlifnei HaTzimtzum, the range or the Hishtalshlus that begins in Eirin Seif Shlifnei HaTzimtzum, all the way down to Atzilus. And then all the names are sort of pushed up, such that Atzilus becomes Elam HaAsiyah the Klolus. And Eirin Seif Shlifnei HaTzimtzum becomes Atzilus the Klolus. So he's saying this usage of the word Shem, Shmi, is applicable not just to Atzilus the Klolus, but also to Atzilus the Protus. Not just Atzilus the Protus, but to Atzilus the Klolus. The darga of Atzilus the Klolus is also called Shmei, Uki Yadua. The Klolus is Stalshus Mirish Koldagi in Haingam Bechinas parts of the Ak Atzilus Koldagi Nichla B'derech Klal Begimel Eilamis Biyah. So in Eilamis the Klolus, starting from the beginning of the Hishtalshus HaMadregas, which is in Ak Odin Kadmein.
What does Koldagi mean over here? Doesn't mean Asiyah, does it?
No, Atzilus Koldagi means two Atzilus. Is the Eilamis of Biyah, Bri Yitzir Asiyah, the Klolus again. The Ak Nikra Odin the Bri the Klolus. Odin Kadmein is referred to as the Odin of Bri the Klolus. Va'kudim the Kudim, Oy Atik va'arich Nikra Odin Titzir the Klolus. Va'atzilus Protis, Nikra Asiyah the Klolus, Chulik Mishkosik Makamachim. Yeah? Again, looking for 6.1 if you want to have more details on that. U'bechinas Atzilus the Klolus, Hu ha'oir ein seif shlifnei hatzimtzum. Shal zeh omar actually nivra ilam hayahu ushmei bulvad. So regarding which, so before the Bria Sa'ilam is before the Tzimtzum Arishain, lifnei hatzimtzum Arishain, then that's what it means. Actually nivra ilam. Then what was there? There was hu ushmei bulvad. The Pirush actually nivra ilam haim lifnei hatzimtzum chuli. The hatzimtzum was cholos habriya v'eshavus k'mishkos v'eschayim. But actually, in the Ilam, Hainu b'fnei Atzimtzum, Hayahu Shmei Bulvad, Hu Hainu b'chinas Atmos, U'Shmei Hu b'chinas Eirin Seif. So what was there before the Tzimtzum, before B'riyas Ha'ilamis? What was there? There was Hu U'Shmei. There was the Eibush, the Atmos in Seif, and there was Shmei, which is the Eirin Seif. Shu b'chinas Ispashus v'Gilum Yana Atmos K'meishu b'Atmos b'fnei Atzimtzum. If you're koching in the Bas Legani, you know about the dargis and oir shlifnei hatzimtzum. Like the very narrative that we have about tzimtzum is what was there. The whole of existence was filled with the oir. Tzimtzum oirei alatzad. And then you have the Bris Ha'inimus. So before there was a tzimtzum, there was this pashtus of oir. So this Eirin Seif, Shlifnei HaTzimtzum, the Atzilus Techlolus, is a Ha'ara, is pashtus oir only, on the one hand. At the same time, it's Dobekum Yuchad with the Atzilus, just like we described them at Atzilus Teprotus. Ubechinazu, Ubechinas Atzilus Techlolus. Let's go to the next paragraph. So, just like Atzilus the Klolus is called Shmi, the Atzilus the Protus is called Shmi, so we want to have these two components, these two characteristics of Atzilus. It has the characteristic of a shame being a Arabul Vad, but being Miyuchad with the Etzem. Baha Talia. These two things are dependent on each other. Because the very construction of Atzilus is in this manner of Ispashus Ha'ara, of Gilu Eirin Seif, in a completely different way of the creation of Biyah. The Olam is Biyah Nisav B'derech B'riyesh Me'ayin, so Mash Nisav B'metzias Chodesh Lo Yehoye Kedem, U'meila Even Nisav is U'bechinas Richut Mimekeri Davka. The whole manner of the creation of Olam is Biyah is B'derech Yesh Me'ayin, which we're going to go into a lot more detail as we continue these two Maimarim. But suffice it to say now that in order to innovate an entirely new thing, there has to be a degree of richuk, of separation from the origin of what it is coming from. Because if there is the constant presence of the origin, then it's not possible for the new thing to emerge as a substantive individual thing. When you have parents who are constantly badgering their children and not giving them the space to grow, then it's very difficult for them to become independent, sustainable individuals. But when it comes to Atzilus, Atzilus is not the pshat that you have something which is new and other from what came previously. It's more just an unveiling, an unrolling of what was already there. Everything in Atzilus was previously already out. This is just a furthering and extending of something that already existed. The very nature of Gilui Helam is such that the Gilui of the thing has to be of the same order and the same kind as the thing which is Behelam. Has to be of the same character. You can't have an entire... The Helam is not going to all of a sudden transform into an entirely... The Gilui, what's the Pshat Gilui? Gilui is a reflection of the Etzem. Taka, not the Etzem, but a reflection of the Etzem. So you're not going to have something that is going to be entirely different. It's going to, and the whole lot, Gilui is going to reveal it. It's going to unveil it. So it has this innate connection with the thing which it is revealing, unveiling. So it's these two qualities of being a ha'ara, is only a ha'ara, and being davik in the ma'eh, are not just a statement of two characteristics of a shame, and therefore two characters of Atzilus. Rather, these are these are inevitable outcomes, because if you have one, you have the other. If it's going to be Espashas Ha'ara, it's going to be Dovak in the Etzem. It's going to be Dovak in the Etzem, it's going to be Espashas Ha'ara. And that's why it's called Shemi. Espashas Shema Yisbarech, B'chinas Espashas Ha'ara, Sha'aru Elikus Mamish K'mei Etzem, V'hu Shemi HaMyuchad Bi. Important point. The Ha'ara, because it's Miyuchad with the Etzem, it's only Ha'ara. Because it's Miyuchad, it's Elikus, which is the whole Arichas in Simon Chaf of Egeres HaKodesh, that how can they be called Elikus? How can the Kalim of Atzilus be called Elikus? So here we're talking mainly about Oir, Avaya Oir. So it's we're not getting into the specifics of Kalim. Just talking about it more broadly, but the more broad distinction between Atzilus and Biyah is Atzilus is a horrible vad, which is miyuchad. And it's not. We don't say it's a horrible vad, and nevertheless it's miyuchad with Etzem. Because it's a horrible vad, it is miyuchad with Etzem, as opposed to Biyah, which is Rochuk min Etzem, and is a davar b'fnei atzma. Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's our distinction. And we're going to go further, bringing out the distinction between Atzilus and Biyah. And the reason, always remembering the reason why, is we want to understand what it looks like for Hashem to create the world Midas Adin. That this is sort of the contrast of Atzilus to the way things are in Biyah. Building up Atzilus in this manner gives us a better understanding of the alternative, which is in Biyah. And if Hashem were to really turn the lights off and to make a tzimtzum otzum and to create the world just with Midas Adin, how detached and separate and unaware of Elokus we would be. Okay?